Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog, where the subject will be guns. And why do I want to talk about guns? Well, a big reason is because I just bought one, and can I say what a breath of fresh air buying that gun was. Allow me to explain. I'm originally from Michigan, where guns were not a big deal. I moved from Michigan to New York in 1977, where I lived for 40 years and where guns are a very big deal. New Yorkers, or the government of New York, or well, let's just say New Yorkers, because most of the New Yorkers in New York are liberals, and they're just paranoid. They hate guns and they're just afraid of them. Try to get one. It's very hard. I had a rifle and I had to get fingerprinted for, well, I had the rifles from Michigan, but I had to get fingerprinted and I had to get a license, not to buy a handgun, just to buy a rifle, which I already had. And I probably didn't even need the license really, because these were black powder muzzle loading guns, old-fashioned guns. You pour the powder down the barrel, you gotta use the ramrod, ram the bullet in. It's my hobby. It's what I like to do. So just to be safe, I got a license. That was a pain. I had to take a subway out to Queens and go through all this fingerprinting and rigmarole. But try to get a handgun, that is extremely difficult. Try to get a license to carry a concealed handgun, that is almost impossible, unless, as I think I said in an earlier video, you are wealthy or a celebrity or both. Oh, let's see, gun. Okay, bang, bang, bang. I hope I didn't scare any New Yorkers that might be watching this, or any New York liberals. Donald Trump, for example, has one, and he had no trouble getting one. Howard Stern, he has one. He probably, I'm sure, had no trouble getting one. But for John Q. Public, like me, the average guy on the street, it's almost impossible to get a carry permit. Almost impossible, which is a real irony, because people like Donald Trump can hire bodyguards. It's people like me who can't hire bodyguards who are in the most danger. And we're the ones who have, well, I was going to say the hardest time, but really, as I said, it is almost impossible, so almost impossible that you could really just say it's impossible to get a handgun carry permit in New York City. But I moved to Tennessee about a month ago after 40 years in New York, and what a change. I walked into a gun store. Well, actually, I wanted to try the gun first, and I wanted to have a handgun lesson. So the sales guy behind the counter, for 50 bucks and then another 30 bucks for ammo, he gave me a 1-hour lesson, because even though I was familiar with guns, it was always antique or replica antique guns, black powder guns. So I wanted to get familiar with a modern semi-auto handgun. Loading a magazine as opposed to pouring powder down a barrel, and just the general feel of firing it, the recoil, so on and so forth. No big deal. And actually I did better than I thought for a first-time shooter of a semi-auto modern handgun. After that, I went back to the store. I bought the gun right on the spot. I had to fill out a little form. They did a background check. I walked out with a gun, and now in about a month, June 15th, there's going to be a concealed carry class. To get a permit to carry a handgun concealed in Tennessee, you have to take a class. But it's an 8-hour class. It costs 85 bucks, and then I'll have the ability to get a permit to carry a handgun, and then I'll be able to carry a handgun. I just think it's wonderful. I just think it's fantastic. So I had to share that with everybody. That's number one. But there's a second subject I wanted to get on, which is this whole fear of handguns. This irrational fear and paranoia about handguns has a law of unintended consequences. To know what I mean, I have to talk about a subject that seems completely unrelated, but it's very related, so just bear with me for a second. What do French people and Jews have in common? Well, which I'm one. Well, I'm not French, I'm Jewish. But if you're a French Jew, then I guess you have something in common within your own self. You're French and you're Jewish. But what they have in common that I want to mention now is a low rate of alcoholism. Why is that? In France, it's common to serve wine with meals. So at a very young age, you have children getting familiar with wine. It's no big deal. They see it all the time, and they probably start drinking at a younger age than, well, certainly below the legal age here in the U.S. It is this familiarity with wine that causes them not to drink to excess because it's no big deal. It's like drinking water to excess or drinking too much milk. They just don't do it. And the same thing with Jews. We use wine in our ceremonies. In Passover, you drink wine. So I was drinking wine at a very early age. In fact, I have a memory of, at the age of 12, being offered a scotch and water when I went to visit some aunts and uncles in New York. I was living in Detroit at the time, but I had relatives in New York, still do. So I went to visit. I was 12 years old, and they were offering drinks to everybody, and I was offered one too. So to me, alcohol is no big deal. In fact, I'm trying to drink a shot a day of whiskey because I read it's good for your health. For an older person, which you may have noticed, I am. So I drink a shot a day, but I keep forgetting to drink it. That's how little alcohol means to me. I have to remind myself to drink it because it means so little to me. And it's the same thing with guns. And I'll talk specifically about Chicago, where they're having all these gangland shootings of these 15-year-old kids going out and shooting each other. It's so tragic. One of the reasons, I think, is because guns are a totem. They're a very big deal. They're a very big symbol because they have no familiarity with guns. It's something special. So the point that you first have to make is they have no trouble getting guns. I remember reading an article of 15-year-old kids having absolutely no trouble getting an illegal gun. But if you have a gun, then this is not rocket science. If you have a gun, you want to shoot it. But the only way, well, how can you go shoot a gun in Chicago? The only way you can shoot a gun is in a gangland slang, to go out and shoot a person just at one time. And they're not shooting it for this, well, obviously they're not shooting it for the sport. They want to kill somebody. But if, as I just said with wine, if you don't see these kind of shootings, let's say in Vermont, where it's easy to get a gun. You don't need a permit to buy a gun in Vermont. You don't need a permit even to carry a gun. You could just buy the same way you would buy a loaf of bread, just about, except there's a federal law now that you have to have a background check. But they had really just a very simple law, which instead of 10,000 laws, they have a very simple law. It's against the law in Vermont to commit a crime with a gun. Doesn't that really cover everything? But getting back to Chicago, if kids were being taught about guns at an early age, as happens in other parts of the country where they consequently don't have these kinds of shootings, then the gun is not a big deal because they're used to shooting it. They don't have to go out in a gang and shoot somebody to have the experience of shooting a gun. They're doing it all the time. They have a safe place provided for them to shoot. In fact, I've been reading that more and more schools now, high schools, are having shooting clubs where kids, these are rifle clubs I think, but where kids can learn to shoot and enjoy it as a sport, and then you don't feel the need. There's nothing forbidden about shooting a gun, just as if you have easy access to alcohol and it's no big deal, then you don't find any special attraction in getting somebody, if you're underage, to go out and buy 5-6 packs of beer. In addition, they have somebody qualified showing them a safe way to shoot firearms. It's really so simple, and you wonder why schools don't do that. In fact, in New York City, I saw a photo of New York in the 1950s of kids carrying rifles on the way to a shooting club. They don't have that anymore. They should bring it back. They should not hide people from guns. You can use the same logic that they use for sex education. You teach kids about sex, and then they will have safe sex. So you teach kids about safe shooting, and they will shoot safely. And if you have a young kid that wants to blow off steam by shooting a gun, he doesn't have to shoot somebody. He can go to a target range and shoot something. Finally, to wind this up, I would just add one more point, which is I talked about the paranoia of liberals about guns, but they should also get over their paranoia or their hatred of the NRA, the National Rifle Association, because they have qualified instructors who, or can point you to qualified instructors who are the best people to teach the gun safety that I'm talking about. They also have an Eddie Eagle program. Eddie Eagle, he's a big stuffed, well, he's not a stuffed bird, he's a guy in a bird costume. It's like Big Bird on Sesame Street. But he teaches gun safety to little 5-year-olds. And what does he teach them? He doesn't teach them how to shoot. He teaches a very simple principle that if you see a gun on the floor, you see a gun lying around, don't touch it, find an adult. Don't touch the gun, go find an adult. I can't for the life of me imagine why even the most liberal Democrat would not want a child to learn that. And why would they object to the NRA providing somebody who will teach them that? It's so ridiculous, and this paranoia about guns and about the National Rifle Association is not causing fewer deaths, and I specifically include children. It's causing more. So let's work together, liberals. Let us all work together and teach people about guns at every age, and have a nice day, because this is the end of the vlog. I'll see you again soon. Bye.